Bienvenidos al punto de encuentro entre el análisis económico, los negocios internacionales y las ideas que transforman el mundo. El espacio que te ayuda a entender mejor el mundo de los negocios y la economía global. El futuro de los negocios está aquí. Negocios sin frontera, con Eduardo Mendívil y Samuel Peña. ¡Comenzamos!
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to join you in this live broadcast from Monterrey, Mexico, in our program, Negocios sin Fronteras, the analysis program of our International Business School, where it is a real honor to share business news and global trade analysis this Tuesday afternoon with a stellar guest, our expert directly from Washington, D.C., one of the best international lawyers in North America, Mr. Charles Camp, attorney and professor of international law, with whom we will talk about international law and global policy. I also want to take the opportunity to thank you all for your messages that kindly send us through our social media. You can find us on all digital platforms as Tech Sounds Radio. Thank you very much for all your questions and suggestions. Taking advantage of this patriotic holiday in Mexico, stay with us in the next hour to talk about international business from Monterrey Tech. We continue with the news of Panorama Económico.
Panorama Económico, el acontecer económico mundial.
Chery, the Chinese automaker, announced today that it will establish a manufacturing plant in Mexico next year. This company is the owner of brands like Chery, Jeku, and Omoda, which are leaders in vehicle sales in Latin America. With an already big market share in Mexico, this investment will revolutionize the automotive market, since many experts said a Chinese investment of this nature was impossible in Mexico. House Republicans on Tuesday narrowly adopted a rule that would allow them to avoid votes on resolutions repealing President Trump's emergency tariffs on several U.S. trading partners through March 2026, just as Democrats are ramping up the use of such measures in both chambers of Congress. The U.S. and India have agreed to intensify trade talks, India's Ministry of Commerce and Industry said on Tuesday, following discussions with U.S. negotiators in New Delhi. Acknowledging the enduring importance of bilateral trade between India and the U.S., the discussions were positive and forward-looking, covering various aspects of the trade deal. President Trump is considering British proposed changes to the U.S.-UK tariff deal the two sides struck in May, he said Monday ahead of a visit to London. They want to see if they can refine the trade deal a little bit, he told reporters outside the White House. We made a deal and it's a great deal, and I'm into helping them. Trump and British Prime Minister Keir Starmer in May reached a deal that kept in place 10% tariffs. Officials report at least 60 violations in 50 days in the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement's giant tent facility at Fort Bliss, Texas. As the Trump administration rushes to open a massive makeshift holding centers nationwide, ICE's own inspectors say the marquee Texas project is violating dozens of federal standards for immigration detention. This has been the most relevant events of the day. Now, behold, as we continue with the stellar part of this program, the presentation of our guest this afternoon, Mr. Charles Camp, attorney at law from Washington, D.C., and professor of international law at George Washington University, and the always accurate opinion of our Master of Masters and multi-laureate teacher, my esteemed professor, Samuel Peña. Stay with us as we continue with Visión Global.
La entrevista, lo que dice el experto.
Continuamos con la entrevista especial de este día en este programa bicultural. Directamente desde la ciudad de Washington, D.C. tenemos a el abogado multilaureado Charles Camp, también profesor de la Escuela de Derecho de la Universidad George Washington. Me voy a permitir dar la introducción del currículum de Charles Camp. En este momento, at this moment, we present our guest speaker of today's program, Mr. Charles Camp. Mr. Charles is an international lawyer representing clients throughout the world to resolve large disputes through international arbitration, litigation, and negotiation. Also a professor of international negotiations at George Washington University Law School. Recently, Mr. Camp obtained a $90 million RICO judgment from the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of New York on behalf of 145 Colombian clients. Mr. Camp is a frequent author for the World Financial Review and the European Financial Review, and recently featured in both Forbes and Fortune magazines. Likewise, Mr. Camp also is an active member of the Arab Bankers Association of North America based in New York and the American Society of International Law, where he was a member of its board of trustees and chaired the audit committee. Charles, it's a real privilege to have you in this live broadcast. Welcome to Monterrey Tech.
I'm Eduardo. I'm thrilled to be here, and I hope what I have to say is at least interesting to most people listening.
Yeah, it's great to have personalities such as yourself with this long background in North America. And of course, our audience is eager to listen about your opinion, the heartbeat of Washington, D.C., and the perspective of so privileged, so important law professor. Please, Charles, if you can introduce the subject of the day. We have a very interesting news about the pulse of business in North America, and of course, about the Trump administration's policies.
Yes, if the volume could be turned up for me, that would be great. I would really appreciate it.
Sure. Vamos a tratar de subir un poco más el volumen de la transmisión para que nuestro invitado pueda escucharnos con mayor facilidad. Very well, Charles. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you so much. Well, it's of course my pleasure to be here again, Eduardo. I've known you a long time and tremendously respect your intelligence and really your tremendous devotion to international law and fair trade. You've done great work for your country, and it's just my pleasure to be here. Countries and people around the world are being physically, emotionally, and economically harmed by President Trump's authoritarian and unconventional, to say the least, reordering of the world, imposing unreasonable and likely illegal tariffs, pursuing mass deportations most experts believe border on crimes against humanity, that violate international trade and immigration agreements as well. He also bombs purported drug dealers without any legal authority other than a belief that the people on the bomb boats constitute terrorists. He is just completely reordering the world in a way that we have never seen in the U.S., and I don't think anybody around the world has either. The world must respond in unconventional ways to match Trump's unconventional ways, but legally, in legally supported ways to rein in Trump's continuing destruction of our world as we've known it. The International Criminal Court and the international law make clear that no one is above the law, not even heads of state, such as Trump, are immune from civil or criminal liability in foreign countries for illegal wrongdoing. In the U.S., as you know, the U.S. Supreme Court has granted Trump virtually blanket immunity for anything he does as president. That only applies within the United States. In foreign countries, he has no immunity in foreign countries for what he does that harms people in countries elsewhere. This is demonstrated by the fact that there are outstanding arrest warrants issued by the International Criminal Court created by the United Nations to prosecute international crimes. There are arrest warrants outstanding against President Putin, Prime Minister Netanyahu, Hamas's leader, and others. But the ICC is not the only entity that can hold governments, including their heads of state, responsible for international wrongdoing. Countries each have the ability to enact laws to hold Trump responsible for the harm being imposed outside the U.S. upon their citizens and nationals of such countries. And other countries must do that in order to rein him in. In short, countries can take actions, including enacting laws against Trump and others for their cruel, indiscriminate mass deportations against international law and also in violation of international trade and immigration agreements. The U.S. government, under Trump's authoritarian rule, has gone rogue. It must be stopped by countries around the world through appropriate referrals to the International Criminal Court and by enacting civil and criminal laws to punish foreign governments, including their heads of state, for harming their own citizens through illegal tariffs, mass deportations, and murders of suspected criminals without any due process at all of which violates international law. So that's sort of the gist of my thinking on this, but it's all backed up by well-known and thoroughly researched papers, experts, publications by the International Court and elsewhere. The International Criminal Court has made it clear in multiple opinions that heads of state are not liable for the most serious crimes of international concern. So that's how the International Criminal Court was able to issue arrest warrants for Putin and Netanyahu, neither Russia nor Israel are parties to the International Criminal Court. But that doesn't affect who can be arrested and held liable for their international crimes. It only the membership in the International Criminal Court only has to do with some other jurisdictional issues, but it has nothing to do. Which countries are members of the International Criminal Court has nothing to do with who can be held responsible for the most serious international crimes. So that's not even an issue. That's not debatable. It's well known, likewise, that under just general international law, customary international law, there is no functional immunity for crimes under customary international law. So, despite the statute that created the International Criminal Court, it's an organ of the United Nations. Just outside of that, international law holds that heads of state can be responsible for their really bad actions. With regard to the recent bombings by the U.S. of suspected drug dealers, there was a human rights lawyer, Jamil Jaffer, quoted by the New York Times as saying, there's no congressional authorization of force, there's no pre-existing armed conflict, there aren't any non-frivolous arguments that these men posed an imminent threat, even under the current circumstances. Killing these men in circumstances like this, just bombing people without any due process, the expert said looks like murder to him. So you can't just, rather than giving people suspected of crimes due process, which is required not only by U.S. law and the laws of every country, it's required by international law. You have to give suspected criminals due process. And you can't just unilaterally bomb people. So that's just one example of how we've gone rogue here. It's critical that all countries comply with international law, but because of the way Trump is acting, it's important that countries around the world take actions to impose liability for harms done to their own countries and to their own people. That's my view. If citizens of a particular country, suppose citizens of Mexico are being indiscriminately deported with no due process and sent to South Sudan, the government of Mexico should have recourse against Trump and his officials that are indiscriminately deporting people to third countries with which they have no prior connection. There's an expert who published a paper earlier this year. He's William Worcester, he teaches public international law of international organizations, and international migration and refugee law at the Hague University. He says, he has an article entitled "Trump's Deportations Are an Emerging Crime Against Humanity." Before you can deport somebody, you have to give them the opportunity to prove that they are not going to be subject to torture wherever they are deported to. To do that is a violation of U.S. law, and it also violates the Convention Against Crimes Against Humanity. It's the Torture Convention. So you can't just deport people without giving them due process. Mass deportations are just wrong. And in fact, an interesting fact is, as I mentioned earlier, there's an outstanding arrest warrant against President Putin. Do you know for what President Putin was charged that is the basis for his arrest warrant?
What?
Unlawful deportation.
Oh, wow. Look at that.
Of children. They're deporting children from Ukraine and sending them to Russia. That deportation without any due process of children from Ukraine to Russia, that is the basis for the International Criminal Court's arrest warrant against Putin and others who work for him.
Well, actually, any action of the government without due process, it is something that you need to look at because it's breaking the law clearly.
I mean, every member state of the International Criminal Court can make a referral to the court for it to investigate, and that's what. And there are, I believe, over 200 countries that are member states of the International Criminal Court. Any one of them could make a referral about illegal, about deportations of the mass deportations that the U.S. government is doing with little or no due process. It's the ones with no due process that are the problem, and you can't do it. And unfortunately, our Supreme Court is not acting to prevent that. There's a recent case, Department of Homeland Security versus DVD. In April of this year, the district court in Massachusetts enjoined the government from removing any alien to a country not explicitly provided for in the alien's removal order without following certain procedures designed to enable the alien to seek relief under the Convention Against Torture. In other words, the U.S. District Court in Massachusetts enjoined the government from doing exactly what I'm saying they're doing, which is sending aliens to third-party countries without giving them an opportunity to have due process as to whether or not they're going, they could be subject to torture in violation of the Convention Against Torture. And the Court of Appeals, they upheld that injunction against the government, but the Supreme Court removed the injunction so that the deportations without due process could continue. And Justice Sotomayor, this is what she wrote in her dissent in that case. She said, in a democracy, power implies responsibility.
Of course.
The greater the power that defies law, the less tolerant can this court be of defiance. As the nation's ultimate judicial tribunal, this court, beyond any other organ of society, is the trustee of law and charged with the duty of securing obedience to it. This court, the majority, continues to invert those principles. Today's order, which lifted the injunction on the illegal deportations, today's order clarifies one thing. Other litigants must follow the rules, but the Trump administration has the Supreme Court on speed dial. So she dissented. It's just the rights of people are being trampled, and they're not being protected so far by the U.S. Supreme Court. So,
well,
and we'll talk in a minute about the importance of in the fact that deportations also violate U.S. trade agreements. But it is important that every country, including the United States, comply with treaties.
Of course.
And this is a paper from 2013. It was published in the Georgetown University Law Center by the Georgetown University Law Center. And it said that John Jay, from the 1700s, he warned in the Federalist Papers that a treaty is only another name for a bargain, and that it would be impossible to find a nation who would make any bargain with the United States, which should be binding on them, absolutely, but only on us so long and so far as we want to be bound by it. President Obama at the time made the same point in 2009 at a speech in Prague, where he said, quote, rules must be binding. Violations must be punished. Words must mean something. And this is true even for the United States.
Totally.
So, but practically, it is critical that our country comply with deportation laws, especially when when people under trade agreements are entitled to be present in the United States because they're making investments, because they're working as needed. It is clear, and there are lots of scholars that say that our immigration laws are completely inconsistent with our trade agreements that require the U.S. to take people in and allow them to work consistent with the terms of the trade agreements that they're taking advantage of by coming to the U.S. and investing money. It's just crazy that the U.S. is deporting people who are here specifically because they and their companies are taking advantage of trade agreements where billions are invested, but then they get kicked out and deported with no due process. So
that's one of the main subjects that we're gonna take care of in the next half hour. We're going to take a brief break. Please stay with us. Vamos a tomar una breve pausa para continuar platicando con el abogado Charles Camp desde Washington, D.C., además de darles una breve reseña y información de lo que hemos tratado en esta primera media hora para traducir al auditorio. Volvemos en unos minutos.
Es momento de tomar un break. No tardamos. Sigue con nosotros. Las novedades, las tendencias y los temas de interés del mundo del arte en un espacio para reflexionar, apreciar y ser parte de la vida cultural. Artepuerto MX. Hashtag Arte para la Vida. Martes, 19 horas, con Ninfa Romero. Solo en Tech Sounds Radio, 94.9 FM.
Ya están aquí los luchadores escritores seleccionados para Lucha Librotech 2025. 16 participantes se enfrentarán en relevos a la hoja en blanco y en tan solo 5 minutos, con creatividad e ingenio, lucharán para vencerla. Conócelos en ediciones.tech.mx/ES/Lucha Libro 2025 y prepárate para acompañarlos en las eliminatorias. Un evento de la Dirección Nacional de Desarrollo Cultural de la Escuela de Humanidades y Educación.
A mitad de la semana, hacemos un recorrido musical por los sonidos más eclécticos del mundo. Showgaze, lo-fi, indie, folk. Experimenta el paisaje auditivo en Mon Mosaic con Tere Barragán. Miércoles, 8 de la noche, solo por Tech Sounds Radio, 94.9 FM.
La radio evoluciona. La inteligencia artificial se conecta con la música. Lo digital y la innovación marcan el ritmo del futuro. Sinergia 3.0. El festival de todas las radios. Tecnología, creatividad y música. En un mismo espacio. Centro Nacional de las Artes. 18 de octubre.
Octubre 18.
Radio, tecnología, cultura e inteligencia artificial se conectan. Sinergia 2025. Artistas, bandas y proyectos. En resistencia.
Cierra tus ojos y escucha cómo el sonido se convierte en pensamientos. La Sinfónica del TEC presenta Café Pautado, Mantra, un recital concebido como un viaje musical hacia la introspección. Obras que evocan serenidad mediante la abstracción sonora. Café Pautado, Mantra, donde el sonido se convierte en calma. 18 de septiembre, 20 horas, Auditorio Luis Elizondo. Evento para todo público, entrada libre, cupo limitado.
En el primer año trabajamos para que la vivienda sea un derecho de las y los mexicanos. Cambiamos la ley y emitimos decretos para que 5 millones de familias disminuyan o terminen sus créditos. Además, iniciamos la construcción de 200,000 nuevas viviendas para familias que ganan entre 1 o 2 salarios mínimos y vamos por 1 millón más. Con acceso a vivienda digna, la transformación avanza. Gobierno de México.
Vibraciones sonoras convertidas en ondas. Sonidos que viajan. Tech Sounds Radio, 94.9 FM. Sonidos que amplifican tus ideas. Estamos de regreso. Continuamos.
Gracias, buenas tardes. Estamos de regreso transmitiendo en vivo desde el campus Monterrey en Tech Sounds Radio 94.9 FM. En esta transmisión especial con el profesor Charles Camp, directamente desde la ciudad de Washington, D.C., profesor de la Universidad George Washington y multilaureado abogado en materia de Derecho Internacional. En la primera media hora estuvimos conversando acerca del pulso de Estados Unidos, lo que se vive actualmente en Washington con las decisiones de la administración Trump en materia de inmigración, en materia de aranceles y de las forma en que están combatiendo el terrorismo en América Latina, haciendo especial énfasis en el debido proceso y la implementación del Estado de Derecho, siguiendo la ley como una forma de hacer justicia y de la responsabilidad que tienen los funcionarios públicos en la aplicación estricta de la ley en cualquier país, sobre todo por las implicaciones que tiene en materia internacional y los organismos internacionales que deben de velar por la implementación de ese grupo normativo y la justicia para evitar abusos de cualquier Estado miembro. I was giving a brief a summary of what we talked about in the first half hour. We're broadcasting live from Campus Monterrey Tech in Mexico, with Charles Kemp, which is our expert, international law and policy, international public policy, talking about these important issues about immigration, terrorism combat, tariffs, and the economic impact that these measures have on development and businesses, not only in North America, but worldwide. We were talking about, Charles, about all these important issues and how does this impact economic development. And I would like to address something that happened some weeks ago, some months ago in Los Angeles, specifically these raids that the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency made there and affected the workforce, since especially in the Long Beach docks, is the businessman there said that a lot of workers did not show themselves to work on those days because of the fear of being deported. The economic impact that it has, it was enormous. And actually, the governor of California talked about the issue as something that it will affect economy in that state. I would like to know, especially your insight about that issue.
You want my input? Okay. It is so counterproductive to Trump's economic plan to have ICE workers chasing farm workers down the fields who are just trying to pick the crops, do the work, that needs to be done. But it's not only in California in the agricultural sector; it's everywhere. We saw the Korean automobile manufacturer where they invested billions, and ICE came in and took, I think, 300 people out of the plant in one day.
450 people, which South Korean were 400.
Yeah, and so I am positive, without having seen the documents, I am positive that those people had a right to be there because it was pursuant to a trade deal, to do the manufacturing. I mean, Trump wants manufacturing to come here, but he wants to chase the people that will do the work, out on the streets and send them to South Sudan. It's just mind-boggling how we have gone, off the rails. We have, I don't know who's there's obviously nobody looking at the whole picture. You have people focused on, let's just, with the quotas to get to get so many hundreds of thousands of people out a day. And then you got the trade people, we need the work done. Then you got the tax people saying we need to bring in more revenue. And, I saw a figure the other day, it's in the, in hundreds of millions, if not billions of taxes that have been paid by the people being deported. It is just mind-boggling how ill thought out everything is right now. And it seems to be the only common theme is he's becoming an authoritarian, where he can do whatever he wants, whether it hurts people or makes any sense or not. I mean, that's an authoritarian, somebody who does what they want without regard to whether it makes any sense or not, just because they want it. They want a big parade. They want things that don't make any sense. They want to, save money. We need to cut our deficit. But he was spending $1 million a day on National Guard in Washington, D.C., which was having, its crime was down. It's just mind-boggling. So anyway, I'm sorry to repeat myself, but I and everybody I know have no explanation other than it's just he's testing out his authoritarianism and seeing how far he can get the military to go to support him, which is scary.
Yeah, I mean it's well known as in international law principle that uncertainty affects investment. Most investors will not invest in a country where the rule of law is not well placed, or there's doubts about the application of justice. So it's very important to guarantee those things in order to project more economic development. And what you pointed out very precisely about the issue about this Hyundai plant in Georgia, where ICE made a raid that they detained 450 people. The government of South Korea was concerned about their nationals being deported to any other place in the world. So they act immediately to bring them back home. And actually, last week, there was these declarations of President Trump about striking a deal with them in order for those South Korean nationals that if they can remain in the United States, if they comply to teach other workers about their trade. How about that?
I saw that. I think he said he wanted the Koreans to teach our American workers, quote, how to do hard things. He wants the workers just to teach our workers, but we don't have the workers with the skill to do that. At least not readily available in the numbers. And it's every day you wake up and you just can't believe the bad news until the next day you wake up and there's just more bad news. So if you think the news is bad this week, just wait till next week. That's what everybody says around here.
Yeah, it's very dynamic. Politics has turned to be kind of different and not that diplomatic as they were years ago. And one of the main concerns, especially for our audience, is how do we can guarantee this rule of law to be in place properly, and how to guarantee due process, especially because business people are concerned about these things, because there's a lot of workforce that they do an incredible job, but nonetheless they have these illegal status, and they have been very vocal saying that instead of doing deportations, the government should legalize them, offer them a due process so they can regularize, or they could make their presence, their residency legal in the United States. Do you think that will be possible, Charles?
I think in a normal administration, it would be absolutely possible. During this administration, it's very difficult to predict if reason will win out. It is critical that everybody, it's critical for countries to comply with rule of law. Like you said, it's critical for investors to know that rule of law will be followed. And as Pam Bondi, our Attorney General, has said, whatever the president says is the law is the law. So that doesn't give anybody certainty about, what the law means, what is constitutional. It's a very uncertain time. It's a very dark time here in the United States. Things are not getting better. You touched on confidence. Consumer confidence in the U.S. Is plummeting. That's why, prices are down. People aren't buying things because they're just uncertain. In the Washington, D.C. area, I think they're well over 100,000 people with, who work for the federal government have all been fired. So it's a very uncertain time, for people to come here, people having to leave, people wanting jobs, things are all going in the wrong direction. You want people to be able to buy houses, but you can't fire 100,000 or more people or 1 million people and then wonder why people aren't buying houses. You can't have rule of law that changes. I think I read yesterday over 80% of the appeals by the Trump administration to the Supreme Court, the Supreme Court issues a favorable decision to Trump. Over 80%. In any other administration, it's 60%, 50 to 60%. But here, it's like Sotomayor said, the administration has the Supreme Court on speed dial. He's getting what he wants from the Supreme Court. That's why he set up the Supreme Court the way he did last time he was in office, because he predicted he would need a Supreme Court that would go his way. And that's exactly what he's got, which is very, very, it's a very bad time.
Yeah, well, the United States always been an example of constitutionality. Since the founding fathers, that was the objective of setting apart from monarchy or from an autocrat that rule the political scene, the social life. So given the Constitution, given especially laws that people can rely on and have these rights, that's practically very American. And nowadays it seems that it's not like that. It's the interpretation, not only interpretation, but taking out the laws that it's under the convenience of the administration is something that perhaps we haven't seen in ever or in years, and that is something that produces a little bit of uncertainty. But there are some parts of the people in the states that thinks that's the way to go to set law and order. But as an attorney, I think that giving certainty and justice about the application of the law, especially if you are a public officer, is mandatory. So one of the things that the impact of economic development has is that, for instance, the inflation, this tariff scheme and hasn't produced exactly to lesser inflation. What do you think, Charles, about the implication that this tariff scheme is having, and where do you see that this is going to take us?
I think we haven't seen the effect yet of the tariffs on inflation. I think large companies are trying to mitigate as much as possible the price increases because of the tariffs. I heard an expert talking yesterday who said that they think it will take 6 months after the tariffs are all fully in place for inflation rates to fully reflect the tariffs. So I think we're not seeing that, and I think I think it's going to take some time, and the tariffs change all the time. Plus, as the president said today in a press conference, it is at our Supreme Court to decide whether or not the tariffs, most of the tariffs, are legal or not. Most of the tariffs were issued under his, I believe, erroneous belief that there's a national emergency that justifies him having the power to issue tariffs, impose tariffs. Tariffs are supposed to be imposed by Congress, not the president. It's only when there's an emergency, but never in the history of our country has this Emergency Powers Act been used to impose tariffs on anybody. We're not being invaded by Mexico or India or China or any of the rest of the 100 countries that we're putting tariffs on. There is no basis for that. And I think the question of are the tariffs legal or not, my prediction is the Supreme Court's going to find they're not legal, because multiple courts have found that they were illegal. The U.S. Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit found they're illegal. Every court that's looked at it. But the question is, again, what's the Supreme Court going to do? And it may not be good. But everything I've been saying, what I said earlier, which I know there was a lot to unpack there, it's important for countries, every country, to enact their own laws to deal with the harms that are being imposed on their countries and their people by the president and this administration. I think you can't sit around, countries cannot sit around and wait for Trump to change and our Congress to stand up and do the right thing. Or you can't even wait for the midterms and hope that, despite all the gerrymandering, that there's a change in the power between the House and the Senate and the president next November of next year. I think countries have to impose their own penalties for things, penalties, civil and criminal liability on our administration that does things that harm people. If our administration is bombing people without murdering them, without any due process, the countries where those people are from ought to be able to bring a criminal action against the responsible people. There's no immunity for outright murder, which is what it is. This is not an armed conflict where there's a declaration of war. This is just, Trump and Hegseth saying we can bomb whoever we want. I mean, J.D. Vance the other day, I won't say this word because he's on the radio, but J.D. Vance says he doesn't give a SH, if folks call the Venezuelan boat strike a war crime. He doesn't care. Our vice president says he doesn't care if it's a war crime for us to be bombing people in boats doing who knows what. Trump said maybe they were even fishing. He didn't know. But they're blown up and there's no evidence left over. So I think it's critical for the world that every country do whatever they can to rein in the harm that's being done. I think each country has a duty to protect their own citizens. And I think we've been waiting, everybody's been counting on the U.S. to do the right thing so that the harm will stop. I think that the time to wait is over. And I think countries need to act to stop the harm.
These are challenging times for sure, Charles. And it's been a privilege to have you, to hear you, and know your insight directly from Washington, because we believe we are in a region nowadays. Our economy is very interconnected between Mexico, the United States, and Canada, and many things that happens internally in our countries affects our neighbors, and it's critical to produce ideas that bring us the development that we all want, and of course following the rule of law, the due process, and delivering justice for every countrymen in our region. Voy a dar un breve mensaje para despedir a nuestro invitado. Ha sido un programa donde hemos tratado diferentes temas acerca del Estado de Derecho, el debido proceso en temas tan delicados como la inmigración, el combate al terrorismo, los aranceles y el impacto económico que tiene en nuestra región, platicando con Charles Camp, que es un profesor de la Escuela de Derecho de la Universidad George Washington y un multilaureado abogado internacional experto en negociaciones internacionales y en conflictos internacionales, hablando sobre todo de lo que sucede actualmente en Norteamérica. A last message, dear Charles, for our audience, if you please.
It's been my honor to be here. I'm happy to continue this conversation. I think it's a conversation that needs to happen all around the world. People have to stop wringing their hands, and countries have to get together, enact laws to fix the problem.
Thank you, dear Charles. It's been a privilege to have you on the show. And of course, officially, I invite you now to be present in the cabin at Monterrey Tech, which will be an honor to have you as a professor. Thank you so much, Charles.
Thank you. It's all my honor. Thank you so much.
Thank you for our dear audience. This has been Negocios Sin Fronteras, transmitting directly from Monterrey Tech, Campus Monterrey. Please have a wonderful afternoon. See you tomorrow.
Que el conocimiento se convierta en oportunidades. Esto fue Negocios Sin Fronteras. No te pierdas nuestra siguiente emisión mañana en punto de las 5 de la tarde. Negocios Sin Fronteras con Eduardo Mendívil y Samuel Peña.